Hey folks, happy Wednesday.
Yeah, happy Wednesday. So Kim, who usually facilitates the meetings, says she's going to be either late or might not be able to make it at all. I guess I sort of noticed, and I guess I volunteered to facilitate for today, unless somebody else wants to take it. But okay, I guess we can give it like another minute or so for a few more folks to join, and then we can get started. Sound good?
Sounds good. Thanks. Also, for the audience that's here, full disclosure for me, after Secure Supply Chain Con, my workload increased about 50%. But that should end soon, so I should go back to being able to review things, but I've been useless in the SLSA front for a little bit. So sorry about that.
Yeah, I think that's the same case for a lot of us. A whole lot of follow-ups, a lot of good stuff coming out of the Supply Chain Security Con and KubeCon. All right. All right.
That tweet thanking everyone for their contributions.
All right, cool. I guess we can get started here. Okay, so yep, this is the bi-weekly sort of SLSA community meeting. We have a couple of things on the agenda, but before getting into that, wanted to sort of reach out and see, is there anybody on the call who sort of new, wants to introduce themselves? You know, this is their first meeting.
Hi, I'm Naveen. I work in the OSSF scorecard, contribute a lot over there. OSSF scorecard obviously wants to become SLSA compliant and also interested in SLSA. That's the reason I'm here. Thanks.
I am Dave Stewart. Oops. Okay, I'm Dave Stewart. I'm with Intel. I am the security and privacy lead for our software and advanced technology group. So software products that Intel produces, I'm responsible for the security side of those products. And been pretty involved in supply chain, sort of work throughout the summer.
Hi, I'm Marco Fransen, working at Philips in the research department, and we recently also started to look into SLSA.
I'm Emmy Eide, and I work at Red Hat. So I'm the senior manager for the software supply chain security team. We fall under product security. So I'm the lead for that, and have a vested interest in software supply chain. So I'm excited to be here.
Anybody else? Otherwise, we can get started on the agenda. All right, I guess I'll take that as a. Okay, cool. So first off, Priya, with regarding the V0.2 work.
Yeah, pretty much just the question that I wrote in there. Just wondering when we can turn the draft into like an official release, because then I can get started actually writing code and making the required changes in text on chains. I don't know if there's like some sort of process set up for this, or like if we just kind of decide when we're ready to make it official.
So for the other folks, I do know we had discussed regarding the steering committee, like there would be some sort of like level of voting or something like that, just to kind of say, hey, yes, we have a, we have a new release or whatever. I don't remember exactly what we had all sort of agreed on there.
Yeah, I don't think we had like agreement on like specifically for this, like the, the format changes. I don't think we have a process because like we did the initial release and just tagged it. And then, so this is the first time it's come up because it's the second one. I guess we could kind of err on the side of, should we vet these changes more carefully and, kind of do more review for slower releases, or should we err on the side of better to get stuff out and let people try it, and even if it's not perfect because it's a 0.x release, and so we could fix it later. I don't know if folks have thoughts.
Yeah, I think given how new SLSA is and how relatively few systems are implementing it, if this is a significant improvement, that it's worth making a release sooner. And it seems like a reasonably good set of changes that improves the format, that wouldn't be worth sitting on for too long. So I don't know necessarily that we should cut a release tomorrow, but I think it might be worth trying to set a date we should aim for, and encouraging feedback in the interim. And if we don't get any, then we've tried.
Mark, was there some changes or I think it was Microsoft, who you'd be talking to about changes? Was that meant to go in this iteration of the draft, or would that be more long term?
Let me ping them. I don't know if any of the folks are here, William or David, if you're here. Let me ping them. I suspect this would be for a future revision. So the background to this is that I and William Bartholomew and David Orr have been meeting to discuss some of their proposals and things they'd like to see. And it's been a productive discussion. We're at the point now where I think they need to write up like a concrete proposal, and we could get review and kind of have the community agree on it, because it's still like kind of fleshing out ideas in our heads. But I don't think we should block on that unless they have one particular thing that they're like, oh, this looks good or not. So I'll ping them. But I also agree with Joshua that I would lean toward let's just call this V2 unless anyone has feedback. And please review it if you, and maybe let's say we do a release on like Monday, tentatively. So that would be a deadline for anyone who wants to get feedback in.
Monday.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying that Monday sounds good to me.
I was going to say we should try and do a better job of announcing on Slack and the mailing list when there's like concrete things we want feedback on. I don't think everyone's following the GitHub project, but maybe a few more folks are following mailing lists and Slack channels that might be prompted to provide some feedback.
And for what it's worth at this stage in the project, without many stakeholders, it's probably better that, from my opinion, that we err on the side of faster releases. It gives people a sense of urgency instead of thinking, I can get around to it, which doesn't really help anyone at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree as well on that front. Right. Working for a big bank, and I think even us, we're kind of like, hey, we would much rather have more frequent releases, because we recognize that with a lot of the supply, like if the supply chain work was fairly standardized and hardened already, then I can imagine, yeah, we want to make sure that, releases are more clearly vetted. But we recognize that pretty much throughout the space, a lot of this work is changing on like in some cases an hourly basis. So I would err on the side of, at least for the immediate future, more frequent releases.
Sounds great. I'll take an action item to send the announcement later today. And I'll also put together something to document our this particular point, so we know for when it comes up next.
Yeah, it's probably worth bounding that to like once we've made a 1.0. Oh, sorry, worth being explicit that once we make a 1.0, we expect things to be much slower. But while we're building towards that, we'll be making frequent releases.
Certainly.
Shall I jump into the next topic since my name is on it and Mark is busy typing?
Yep. Sounds good.
So this was just in the same vein I suggested with sending things to the mailing list and the Slack channel, just basically a request for some feedback on this issue, whether we think we should be recommending signing signing of artifacts with SLSA. We recommend in a similar way to that we recommend but don't require reproducible builds at SLSA level 4. I think it makes sense to recommend but not require signing artifacts, and the main rationale there is that in an ideal world, you'll have your SLSA provenance and you'll be able to make your at-use policy decisions based on that SLSA provenance, and due to the provenance information and the fact that the attestation is signed, you get something like a detached signature, but the ecosystem's a long way from that, but there are places which support signing today. And so the recommendation to sign artifacts provides some value in the near term.
Some of the questions around this solved by something like the criticality score, because I know there's discussion in the thread about the value of signing, like some signatures have no value really or limited, others have a lot. Is this just something that could be accounted for in a model, so we don't have to really worry about the fine details at a high level? Is that even a coherent question?
I think, I think so. The current requirements don't say anything about signing, despite requiring that folks sign their attestations. So I think the general philosophy of signatures is like there's probably value in providing more guidance around the value of a signature, but I'm not sure it's directly related to this discussion in that we don't do that for attestations today, although we have an issue to try and recommend some effectively PKI for signed attestations.
Hey, Joshua, I have a question. It's Dave Stewart. I was sort of wondering, sorry if this is a dumb question, this is my first meeting. What is this similar to what you would what people are expecting for an SBOM?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my train of thought in proposing this was effectively that so I work on and in open source, so everything I think about is open source ecosystems, and some open source ecosystems support package signing today. So, PyPI, for example, has a very well hidden feature that you can sign the packages you upload. And where those features exist, actually signing your packages is better than not, arguably, although I think, and maybe the ultimate outcome of this discussion, given the comments that Jack has made, is that there's too many thorns here to even make it worthwhile recommending effectively, right? And that's a reasonable outcome as well. I just wanted to ask.
Reason I ask is that broader discussions about supply chain, securing supply chains usually include something about SBOMs. I'm not actually particularly a big fan of them, because I don't think a lot of people, when they consume software, actually check the SBOM. But it's, conceptually where, one sort of idea is, you sign all the constituent parts, you sign the whole mess, but then it's like, is anyone actually checking these things? I mean, it's one of those practices that's like, you can go through in a lot of effort to do it, and then is it, kind of as you're alluding to, does it have a lot of value? So you can kind of argue yourself either way. So anyway, that's helpful. Thank you. I guess I don't have a particular point of view about, signing artifacts from that sort of standpoint, unless it's the ultimate thing that, there are tons of artifacts as a part of the build process that you aren't necessarily, I don't think I'd want to sign all the .os that, cascade out of a build. On the other hand, the signing software at the end of the process is actually probably pretty valuable and almost universally in some fields probably practiced. But anyway, as you said, making it required might be challenging.
So my two. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So my 2 cents on a lot of this is so at least looking at sort of SLSA and the attestations versus the actual artifacts themselves is I think that they're kind of doing 2 separate things. The SLSA sort of attestations, at least in my view, at least the way I've seen it, is sort of you are, establishing provenance. You are sort of doing a high level overview of, hey, these sorts of steps happened. But they're not really talking about what happened in an individual step per se. And that's where I think the signing of the artifact really does make sense, is you're kind of saying, hey, this identity, right, this system, whatever, did this thing, and I am signing the output of that thing. And SLSA is more like attesting that, hey, in this given workflow, I am saying that these things happen usually in something like this order. So that's kind of the way I've been viewing it. It sort of kind of ties into sort of the like in toto side of things as well, right? Where in toto is sort of a flow of things, whereas it's not really making much of an argument about what is happening in an individual step. And so that's why I do think signatures of some of those things is still important, right? Like I as an example, I care about that. Yes, my image was signed by the thing that generated the image, but I also care that something else is attesting that all the different things I expected from a workflow standpoint happened. Did that make sense?
I think so, to me. Sorry, I mean, just barging in the conversation. One thing I think that's worth reminding ourselves is that if we think about how signing used to be done, we're going to go down a path where it's convoluted, it's hard, key management and all that, and so we're going to shy away from it. But if we look at new ways of doing it where we can automate a lot of it, and by that, and not only I mean like signing, but also verifying, like if all of that could be more transparent, then we can reach a point where there's no reason not to sign, because it becomes trivial both to sign and verify in the in the supply chains. And then why not sign all .os? I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can make an argument about CPU cycles and storage space and all that, and it's a fair argument. But conceptually, I'd like to reach a point where basically it's all signed because it's so simple to do it and to verify it automatically. Then of course we sign it.
I think it might be useful to come from the prior of, if we can advocate for less PKI, that might be better. I think in the general case, does a person coming in and trying to apply SLSA really gain a lot from just trying to sign something somewhere? I'm really skeptical of the value in again, potentially advocating for any more than is absolutely necessary, when you could potentially derive a lot of the same guarantees from sort of operations on the
Matt, did you get cut off there?
The Cyclone DX S-bomb.
Is it just me?
No, I
No,
can
it's
hear
not
you
just
fine.
you.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Everyone else is good.
Okay. One. Mark, you have your.
So one, maybe to continue Matt's thought, I had, in my opinion, I think it would be valuable not to recommend necessarily it should be signed, but rather describe the properties that we want out of it. Like what is the signing trying to accomplish? So like it's also just signing doesn't do any good unless there's verification down the line. So that would be my inclination of like, if the intent is so you don't have to trust the package repository, or that you signal that the author had actual intent or something like that. I think there's a lot of reasons why signatures are used, but that's something I would like to kind of work out before going on the requirement. And then signing, that would, I think, both indicate, or that would lead us toward like what type of signing suffices and what doesn't. And in case there's like alternate solutions that achieve the same purpose.
I think that's a reasonable request. I mean, the nucleus of the idea from me was really just there are existing places where signing is supported, and people are starting to look at adopting SLSA. So should we be recommending that they use that existing signing support when it's not possible to like pip install something and make sure that it has, or to, at use time verify the SLSA provenance, right? That's a manual step today.
Emmy?
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth fleshing out.
So in addition, I might also shed a light here. So I have been working on some code signing things in the last year, and what I figured is that some pieces of software basically require you to do code signing. So let's say you are shipping a Windows application, or you are shipping an Android app. These usually require you to have code signing in place, otherwise you get these nagging windows. But we also figured that indeed PKI key management is the complex thing. Like, how do you deal securely with these secrets? Because adding code signing and then not having good practices to deal with the secrets, that's of course also basically the reducing the security of the supply chain. So there we also did a lot of research. So I also shared it already in this ticket. We did a small proof of concept with Spiffy and Vault to get rid of this initial secret and how to manage that. But we also figured that different ecosystems have different tools already available, and these tools require you to use X509 PKI certificates, for example, for Windows code signing. But other ecosystems like signing a Git commit requires you to do GPG. So also there we were looking more into like, okay, how can we leverage the existing ecosystem, the existing tool landscape, and then how do you combine and integrate those things? So I do think that artifact signing should be recommended, but we should also see how we can lower the barrier for people to adopt it in a secure way. So by using the existing tools, because that's what they are usually already using.
The signing and how to make it, one, the meaning of it, the semantic meaning of what that signing means more valuable. So very often signing is you're signing a snapshot in time, whether it is you're signing a built artifact when it's due to like a code signing that you're then going to submit to somewhere else, or you're going to distribute that and it can be verified that it is what it is. And the other kind is very often then the signing of some sort of a source distribution or some other artifact. But to make it actually work for the supply chain, right, you don't necessarily want to just have a signed thing somewhere in the chain. What you really want to be signing is the links, the things that map from one part of the chain to another part of the chain. So to be able to say, from this, right, from this set of source, from this set of environments, from this set of build systems, I then produce this other thing. And so it is the chain, the mapping between like where we started and the product I'm going to distribute And if that is the kind of action that is signed, and that's what the semantic meaning of the signing is, from that you can build an entire chain.
Yeah, so for example, let's say I'm now depending on a whole bunch of dependencies, but those tools currently do not have code signing things in place. So I basically trust the things by manually verifying things or things like that, comparing the checksums. And eventually we produce an artifact that has signed that is signed. So from that perspective, as long not everyone is doing the signing, you will have to combine it with other things.
Yes, and in a world where you have a lot more kind of reproducibility in builds, right? Then you wouldn't even necessarily have to sign that output because it's reproducible, right? But that's not the world we live in. Everything's not going to perfectly reach that goal, and so what do you end up needing to do is to sign the action that any CI or build system performed, which is that I started with X and I produced Y.
Right. Isn't that precisely the provenance that we're talking about, or are you talking about something else?
That's what I mean, because I just want to make sure that it is the mapping from X to Y that is signed, not either X or Y.
So I do want to just put a little bit real quickly. One thing that I think is something that I think and tell me if folks think I'm off base here. It sounds like the big thing that potentially you want to say from a signature standpoint, like the attestations make sense, but there's also an element of, hey, I have an identity and this identity did a thing. And I want to show that that identity did a thing by, saying, hey, like an easy way is potentially saying that identity signed that thing. So like the image builder signed the image, the SBOM generator signed the SBOM. And to be clear, I think you still want to have that, the provenance standpoint where you're signing the links between them, but you also still want to say, hey, the links are also only as good as what the steps themselves did. Like if a step lied to you, right, the signing of the links between them is still going to indicate that, an art is not going to provide any additional guarantees, I guess is my point there. Oh, sorry, John, you have your hand up.
Oh yeah, it was up a little bit earlier for one of the things. I kind of forgot what triggered it, but there's this thought that, hey, signing and verifying is important and maybe it should be a requirement in SLSA, maybe it shouldn't be. I think what's really important is explaining why. And for me, it's like just use a farm to table analogy. Like there's a great episode in Portlandia. People they want to go like, I don't know, eat an omelet in a restaurant. And software supply chains is like basically tracking, the entire provenance of that artifact, whether it's an omelet or a binary, all the way down to the chicken, the little worker node that produced that artifact, the farmer that managed that chicken and sent it to the farmer's market, the chef that picked it up at the farmer's market and put it in the refrigerator and stored it at the right temperature. And each of those steps is like can be signed and attested that this was done by this particular identity. And so all the way to the server that brings you the plate of food, has an assigned and attestable identity that's saying, I am a server that works in this restaurant. I'm not just somebody randomly off the street who picked up this plate to bring it to your table and swap these omelets with like quail eggs instead of chicken eggs, or something more malicious like arsenic infused omelets. And so I don't know if like making it a requirement is going to be easy, because as you all are talking here about the complexities of signing infrastructure and the various implementations, we're going to have a lot of like debate over that. I think it's really just important to talk about like, hey, what's the general idea here? What's like the algorithm for doing this? And let the implementation be delegated downstream to those individual projects. So I don't know how to connect that back to the current thread. I'm sorry. I just wanted to spit that little analogy.
No, I think that there's a really good thing there about, I think it's just about what identities performed what actions, right? And you know, making sure that, you know, that's, I think, one of the things that's really important there. You know, you have the links between the things, but you also care about the identities, because then you can always go back and say, yeah, like if the farmer, right, like if the farmer, you know, sold something bad to somebody, you can go back and say, hey, did you sell bad things to everybody? Right.
Yeah, it's like, is there
and
E. coli? Is there E. coli in my kale? You know, if we were like really had good supply chains on our food, we would know exactly like where that got introduced, you know. And there's like seed to sale is cannabis, California, like regulations. They have a whole track and trace program, and so they have supply chain for cannabis distribution, growth, and sales and whatnot. And it's really interesting to see that in a non-tech industry take place, like a really robust supply chain that causes a lot of pain for those individual business owners, but overall is really interesting to reason about. I don't know. All I was trying to say is like, it's really hard to get really into the weeds of implementations for like SLSA level 4 requires like, you know, certain implementations of certain signatures for provenance verification or whatnot, because at the end of the day, you just want to solve it, but you don't necessarily want to tell people how to solve it, you know, because to each their own in a lot of different situations. But yeah.
So one thing, maybe I could try to recap the conversation. Two things I heard from the conversation. One, it seems like people are using signing for a couple different purposes, which kind of reiterates my request to like, let's clarify the purpose of what we're trying to achieve, and then digital signatures are kind of one mechanism to do that. Another thing that I think is not explicit right now, but we should agree on either now, or I suggest actually maybe we discuss this at the next meeting, because we already have other things on the agenda.
Yep.
But what is SLSA trying to achieve? I think we might have said at some point that, or at least in my head, SLSA is trying to do supply chain integrity, which is about protecting from tampering. So there you only, at least again in my mind, you only need to worry about mutations, as opposed to like, you know, did so-and-so verify it? Did they test it? Did they do the other things? At least that's what is in my head and what I think is documented, but that doesn't have to be the case. And so I think we could either, that might be a topic for a future meeting of like, should SLSA cover other properties than integrity? Are we defining integrity in a way that people generally understand, et cetera?
Sounds good.
But there are assertions like, for example, that people have reviewed something as it's come in. So it's not just about integrity per se.
Well, so the review piece is there as a proxy for did the organization that owns the software, did they agree to it? And that's like a hard to define. So we could approximate that by saying two, you know, responsible parties have agreed to it. And so therefore no individual has the ability to tamper with it. But colluding, they'd still ability.
Okay. So it's less an assertion of like quality or security as opposed to an assertion of just origin.
Goal is just around protecting from tampering. Other, like I've been thinking of this as other aspects of quality, like vulnerability scanning, code quality. There's like the whole OSF scorecards projects has like a lot of these different properties. Like, was it tested, et cetera. You could layer on top, but the first, like, this also would provide the baseline of integrity of like, is this even the legitimate software, and are we talking about the same thing?
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try
And again, this is in my head, but it's
on.
something that we could agree as a community.
Sure. I was just going to try and put the lid back on this can of worms that I opened and suggest that we move on to some of the other agenda items because there are quite a few and we're not going to resolve this today. But if you do have strong opinions, please make them known in the issue, and I have taken the AI to clarify the intent.
All right, cool. Mark?
Yeah, this is just this is just a brief kind of announcement in case you didn't happen to be following all of the GitHub commits. I wrote up it's a work in progress and it's not fully fleshed out, a list of detailed threats and mitigations that we hope SLSA to cover. The format is not particularly readable. So again, any suggestions for improvement there would also be welcome. But the idea is that I want to kind of give like the nitty gritty detail of like what are all of the different threats that we want to address. And if you scroll down a little bit, I could just talk about a couple of quick examples. If you go down a little bit further. So for example, like someone directly submits without review, that a single person has the ability to modify the code. And the mitigation at SLSA level 4 is that there's two-party review. Another attack would be one single person or entity uses two different accounts to review their own code. And that is addressed in the SLSA levels by the requirement that each account that's able to approve maps to a different person. And so there's like a big long list of all these different types of attacks and how, where and if SLSA addresses them. It would be great for folks to review this. I'd love for us to get feedback on this, improve this, flesh it out. And I think this will help. The intention is both to help us as we develop the SLSA requirements to make sure that the requirements really do meet our objectives and cover all the cases. And also document which cases we're not covering, because there's some things that we list as out of scope. And it also helps, like based on my experience within my company of implementing this, when you go to some team and have them implement something, like let's say a build system, that they're going to implement it, it helps them to know like here are all the things that you need to protect against. And so rather than like you need to check this box, but they kind of get a better model of what they're trying to achieve. So that's my little spiel on this. So if you're interested, I'd love to have feedback or pull request to improve.
Cool. Oh, John, is your hand still up or? Oh, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Got you. Yeah, I have like just short, immediate feedback would be like, I would love if it was like a list of those threats like A, B, C, D, E, F, G and stuff. And you could click on the table, you could click on that button like, and then expand the threats there, so like each header, like source integrity and availability, click on it, boom, it drops down all the threats in that category. There's also like some UX people I would love to plug in here, but they're kind of like, they're cool people, but they also need to make a living. So I don't know if there's a budget that's allocated for this type of work, but there's like some great technical people out there that might be able to contribute, and I can send them your way as like a GitHub issue. But yeah, those are like my immediate thoughts, and thanks for adding all this content. And also, I guess GitHub issues is the best medium for communication, or is it Slack, or both?
Personally, GitHub issues. I am not of the chat mindset. I find it difficult to follow in chat. So personally, I like GitHub issues.
Any other questions, comments, feedback? All right. If that, Mark, did somebody just, there was a, there was an agenda.
Let me move that to the, either to the end if we have time or to next week.
Oh, okay. So I guess next up is my quick update. So if I do this, so the secure software factory stuff is more from the CNCF, is more or less at this point ready for comment. Some emails should be going out to various folks in the community. We should be sending out some additional details, but we are looking for sort of additional feedback on this. You know, areas, we do talk about a little bit about SLSA in here, but we do want to kind of, you know, see where we can tie in the future, where we can tie in further with some of the SLSA stuff, and where we can potentially, you know, collaborate further. Because one of the things that we want to be able to do at some point is be able to say, hey, the secure software factory artifacts that are going through it, as long as you're following all these rules that in the best practices that are in there, we would expect you to be producing SLSA level X artifacts, something like that. And along with that is the secure software factory reference implementation, which is still being worked on. This is based on a lot of the demos that a lot of different folks had done, like Priya with chains and some of the other folks in the community. And we've kind of started to standardize around some of it. And we're trying to build out an actual sort of tool that, you know, hey, this is it's a set of tools that should be able to sort of produce, you know, high level SLSA artifacts because of all those things, and then can also be integrated with easily with admission control for actually sort of, you know, verifying that, you know, for something like a production release, only SLSA level artifacts with all the right attestations go into production, that sort of thing. And so we're also looking for, you know, how we can better collaborate with SLSA to figure out how we can generate attestations better, and how we can integrate with that. And then also, you know, just different ways we can sort of collaborate on that.
What form would you like feedback in? Like people making comments on the doc, or?
So for the actual doc, yeah, comments on the doc, if it hasn't been opened for just general comment right now, I believe in the next couple of days it will be. And I'll keep folks up to date in the various Slack channels and various mailing lists and so on. And then as far as the actual this code over here, feel free to create issues. Feel free to do this. This will fall under at some point the CNCF projects. There's just probably a lot of bureaucracy we need to go through in order to get it, you know, officially part of the CNCF. But yeah, that's kind of. So if it's regarding the sort of reference implementation, the sort of prototype implementation that we're building out, feel free to put it in the GitHub issue and so on. If it's regarding the document, put it in the document. And then also we have meetings every Thursday regarding the CNCF supply chain working group. Cool. Okay. Next up, Marco. The provenance action.
Yes. So we recently started looking into generating some provenance and seeing how we can be SLSA level 1 compliant. And then we found the example somewhere on the SLSA repositories. And we took that example and we basically further structured the code, also got more acquainted, like what is really in such a provenance file, how does it work? And based on that, we added another feature that allows you to generate provenance based on an existing GitHub release. So if you look, for example, inside the CI workflow, which is also in this repository, you will see that we are generating a GitHub release using Go Releaser, and then in the next job in this pipeline, we use this SLSA provenance action to generate the provenance for this release. So what we are looking into right now is how we can do the same for the Docker images we are releasing. And in this case, I'm releasing to the GitHub Docker registry as well to Docker Hub to also experiment with what if I'm releasing Docker images to different registries. How do I generate the provenance? Will I include provenance for everything, or will I only include the provenance for the release to that specific registry? And that's where we are struggling a bit. 2 hours ago, I also had a call with Trishank to get some feedback from him, as I know him from previous projects in the past. And yeah, I also noticed some of the discussions and the issues with the materials and the index pointer to the in material. So what if you have a build that is using multiple repositories, and how to handle that? So we will come back with some more details in GitHub issues to share our findings. And yeah, it would be great to have some feedback on this action as well.
Thanks. I'll definitely take a look. It would be great if you could look at the V0.2 proposal, which is linked up higher in the meeting notes, because the draft 0.2. Because like you mentioned, referencing the materials was one of the things that we hopefully made better in the next version. And so being that you have experience using that schema, and you kind of know what things did you find confusing, what were the rough edges, if you have any suggestions for improvements or just identify problems that you had, it would be great to take a look at 0.2 and maybe make changes there.
Yeah, we will definitely do. And yeah, we are also happy to bring the GitHub action back to the SLSA project at some point in time, if that makes sense. So that's also an option we still keep on the table. So yeah, looking forward to feedback from the community.
Cool. Any other questions, comments? All right. So Mark, back to you.
Yeah, we're so within Google, we're doing annual planning for the next year. I don't know if in your organizations when you do planning for work. So we're starting to think about what are our priorities for the next year. We also still have an outstanding agenda or outstanding item to add a roadmap to the website. So hopefully we could address both at the same time. We're still putting together the proposal for what we'd work on and where we're going to go. I just wanted to raise this issue now in case either some early ideas or to see in people's minds to start thinking about it for next time on what we'd like to work on and prioritize over the next year. One, the current thinking on our side is that we would pick one ecosystem, open source ecosystem, maybe Python and Python package index, if that's, if the Python community is amenable to that, and try to fully onboard onto SLSA. So have the notion of secure builds. My thinking is probably through reproducible builds, because there's just general agreement that reproducible builds are a good thing, and have some notion of policies and to actually protect and both to detect and prevent the attacks that we list in the SLSA threats. so that's, again, kind of early thinking. None of it is committed. None of it is kind of even widely agreed within my org yet. But I just wanted to kind of see this as this is like one thing that we could do. And if anyone has other thoughts on what we could do as a group for over the next year. Or it doesn't even have to be a year, even if it's a shorter timeline, like the next couple months or quarter or something like that. That's great too.
You presented a couple of meetings ago like a reference architecture, Mark. Was the thought that you would develop that as part of this focused effort to establish SLSA within an ecosystem? Or
yeah, and Matt Swoza, who's on the call, has been working on that. I think he's getting close to being able to give a demo. I think like we would, at least for me, that not fully fleshed out is like, do we have like a separate architecture, or do we just make this as part of Python? It's not clear yet, but hopefully Matt should have something soon that he could like present to show like how kind of all the pieces end to end work, to show the concepts, even if it's not necessarily like secure or providing a lot of value, at least to show the concepts. And then from there, we could work it into, like the idea for 2022 would be to actually like do this for real in one ecosystem. And then, in the future, as we have more resources available, we could then take that and go to other ecosystems as well. Feel free, Matt, if you want to talk more about that.
So, I mean, I know the CNCF is very interested in collaborating on some of that as well. Not particularly for a particular necessarily ecosystem, but I know that we're very interested in, obviously the cloud native stuff. So Docker, sorry, I should say container images and those sorts of things. But we'd be interested in seeing how we can kind of also work together to kind of get a high level of SLSA for using cloud native tools to generate something like cloud native artifacts like container images. Axel?
Yeah, regarding the Python community, I think I like the idea a lot. I just think it's worth noting, I was looking at it recently from a slightly different angle, more from the like purely signing side. So it's I need to check how it really maps to SLSA. But for instance, there's been a PEP, a Python enhancement proposal, in floating around and not making much progress, PEP 458, I believe, to enable the Python package index as a tough repository, and that hasn't materialized. It's sort of stuck, and it's been stuck for a while. So just I think it's a fair warning to say, like, I think there is good intentions on the Python community. I think it's something that they've come around to thinking is a good idea. But you can see the PEP was created in 2013, and if you look at a conversation on the forums, it hasn't moved, I think, in a year. So like having a tough repository, having Python, the package index, even just being in a tough repository, seems like a starting point that would be necessary for a lot of other things to be able to to have compromise resilience and stuff like that. So again, I need to check how it maps to SLSA, but just small word of warning here.
Yeah, I want to talk to that briefly, given my name's on the screen, and that is that there is a bunch of like effectively funded work happening in the Python space around stuff that is related to and has overlaps with like SLSA. So I think it's worth being cognizant of that before we plan to invest in Python specifically, effectively. Like, I don't know how Google chose Python, but yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, we're running out of time here, but we should maybe dig into some of the ongoing work streams and details in a separate forum or another time.
Yeah, sounds good. And again, this is I didn't mean to say that like Google has chosen this, but rather I am putting together plans now to to get agreement. I just kind of picked Python as like an example. I don't mean to represent anything as like one way or the other.
Sure.
From my perspective for Salsa, it doesn't really matter so much whether it's Python or Go or Rust or anything else. As long as my thinking, which again doesn't have agreement from either anyone on our side or this community yet, is that it would be valuable to have one ecosystem kind of have it and show how that would work.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I completely agree with that assertion that having an ecosystem be able to demonstrate Salsa end to end would be a major step for Salsa. I just wanted to make sure that we be careful not to effectively invalidate existing work or compete with other people who are investing in this.
Just to quickly address that, if I can, I don't think there's a mutual exclusivity here. I think it definitely can be yes and instead of either or both and rather.
I hope for 2022 priorities, we have like a list of successful implementations of Salsa and across, I don't know, maybe this already exists, of like projects, maybe not big ones like Python and Golang, but like even little bitty projects, like not just proof of concept projects, but like open source projects used by the community, and like a list that shows like, hey, these people integrated this level of Salsa and here's how they did it, as like a testimonial, kind of thing that others can learn from, to help build that network effect of like, this is what all the cool kids are doing, you should do it too. It's hard at first, but follow these steps and you can be Salsa verified at certain levels. So just a thought. Keeping track of projects that are attempting this, to go down this road, and publicizing the success stories.
All right, cool. So we have 2 minutes left in the meeting. Any other quick comments, threads, topics for next? Obviously, feel free to put the for next meeting, put things in the agenda. Yeah. Any other quick comments or anything else? Otherwise, we can. Folks, see everybody in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.
Later.